It's number.
Does it have a number in the doxology, both the pieces? Or the names?
The other one is in the red hymnal. I'll have to go get you. This is.
Okay, it'll be in the check is the next one. Let me put my glasses on and I'll do a closer look downstairs.
Okay. You know, sometimes after a concert, things disappear. Like the red hymnals, for example, are also good.
Found it.
Yes.
Good morning. Welcome on this beautiful, sunny, but windy day. I have a few announcements before we begin our service. A warm welcome to everyone this morning, to those of you here in person and those watching on YouTube. At the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church, we create a home for people of many religious beliefs, or none, people of different skin colors, different ages, different incomes, and different abilities. If you're full of joy, please come in. If your spirit is heavy, please come in. Our Unitarian Universalist heritage teaches us to keep love, never hate or fear, at the center of our beliefs and our work in the world. As a welcoming congregation, we affirm the full inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender identities. A warm welcome to any visitors with us this morning. If you'd like to get connected and learn more about our community life, please take a moment to fill out a yellow pew card located on the back of the seat in front of you. Or sign the guest book in the vestibule where you entered. We hope you'll join us for pie downstairs this morning in our social hall following the service so that we can have a chance to connect in person. Our childcare person, Kiana, is not with us today, so children are welcome to stay in the service. And if you've been coming for a while and want to have a name tag made, there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the sanctuary on the table. And to make it easier for them to get to know us, we should all be in the habit of wearing our name tags. And today, as I mentioned, is Pie Sunday. The membership team has organized a potluck celebration of all things pie at coffee hour today. So everyone is welcome. So please come and indulge in some great cooking. And then after our pie, Reverend Janet invites everyone to work it off by joining in on a tour of the church. If you're new and curious about the building, or you've been coming for a while and are still curious about the building, please join her. We'll start downstairs in the social hall. Yeah.
I have an addition to your announcement. Some of us did not read the memo fully and brought a vegetarian stew, which is heating up.
Okay, good. Yeah. Yes. Well, good. If you're not in the mood for pie, you can have stew. That's even better. Lectio Divina, or Sacred Reading, is a spiritual practice led by Reverend Janet that takes place on Zoom every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And this is open to everyone, so if you'd like to participate, the Zoom invitation is in the Friday email that's sent out every week. And you can see Reverend Janet if you would like more information about it. Also, it's time for Easter flowers. There's a form in your order of service to order flowers to decorate the sanctuary at Easter this year. And before we begin, if the folks watching from home would like to light a candle or a chalice along with us here, please take a moment now and get one so that we can do this ritual together in spirit in a few moments. Thank you.
Good morning. I want to say happy spring. I personally am not really feeling it this morning. It's a little on the chilly side for one of the first days of spring, but here we are in northern New England. But welcome, it's great to see you all here this morning. Just had a couple of things I wanted to share. First of all, I just wanted to share how busy this place has been in recent days and weeks, and particularly no busier than it was this past Friday when we hosted the new Cape Ann chapter of Indivisible downstairs in the social hall. So throughout the afternoon, we had a big crowd downstairs in the social hall. Meanwhile, the musicians were all arriving to rehearse for the Bach concert that happened Friday evening. So, you know, people were just coming and going throughout the day, and it was really a very lively place, and it's wonderful to see this level of activity. So I wanted to also mention a word about next Sunday. I will be doing a pulpit swap with the minister in Portland, Maine. So I will be preaching in Portland, and Reverend Norman Allen will be here preaching for you. And this is a time-honored UU tradition where we just like to get out there a little bit when we get the opportunity, and you know, it strengthens the ties between congregations, and the colleagues get to know each other better. So it's a really positive thing to build us into a little bit more of a larger community. So that's happening next week. And the other thing I wanted to mention is most of you probably haven't heard that we are embarked on trying to restore our cemetery, which I bet a lot of you don't even know that we have a cemetery. It is a landlocked parcel farther up Church Street, and I invite you to go take a look sometime. But thanks to Kathleen Williams, who is not going to want to have me mention her name, we submitted a preliminary application to the city for Community Preservation Act funding, and we got word last week that we were approved and are now invited to submit a full application. So that is happening, and I just wanted to share that with you. And thank you, Kathleen, who's... I would say that she's doing the lion's share of the work, but I think she's doing 2 lion's shares of the work. And I guess that is all for now. So let us deepen our hearts and our spirits for worship. Amid all the noise in our lives, we take this moment to sit in silence, to give thanks for another day, to give thanks for all those in our lives who have brought us warmth and love, to give thanks for the gift of life. We know that we are on our pilgrimage here, but a brief moment in time. And so let us open ourselves here now to the process of becoming more whole, of living more fully, of giving and forgiving more freely, of understanding more completely the meaning of our lives here on earth. Come, let us worship together. Our opening hymn today is number 323 in your gray hymnal, Break Not the Circle. You're welcome to rise in body or in spirit. Andrew, are you going to play the full thing once through, or do you want to just play?
I was going to play the last.
Andrew will give us an introduction, and then rise in body or in spirit. What's that? No. In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship by the simple ritual of kindling our chalice. The flame of our chalice is a symbol of the warmth and the brightness of all of our connections. And the double circles of our beautiful sculpture remind us to keep inviting others into an ever-widening circle. As Jeremy lights our chalice this morning, if you have a candle or a chalice prepared at home, please join us in this ritual to connect us and light it with us now. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share with one another. Newcomers and guests, the words of our affirmation are printed in your order of service if you'd like to read along with us. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. And you're welcome to sit down at this point. Each week we light a candle for peace, always joining our hopes for peace with others who may be doing something similar anywhere around the world in this moment. And this week we are particularly mindful of the failure of the ceasefire in Gaza, of Israel's decision to break the ceasefire and to resume bombing and killing Palestinian residents. We hope for a way out of this somehow. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a king who couldn't be happier. He had a lovely little kingdom. It was very wealthy because the climate was perfect for raising grapes to grow wine. And so all of the people in the kingdom were owned vineyards and produced wine. And it was the most delicious wine that anybody in the region knew of. And so the kingdom was very wealthy because they made so much money growing wine. And the king was deeply appreciative of the hard work of all of his people, and he was always trying to find ways to support them and to make their lives better. And one of the things that he really was concerned about was he didn't want them to have to pay too many taxes. And so he kept thinking about how can he lower taxes, how can he lower taxes? And suddenly one day, I know, let's just make it so that people don't have to pay taxes. His advisors were a little concerned. And they pointed out, sire, we need revenue, obviously. We have to maintain roads and schools and hospitals and all the services that you love to provide for your people. So the king thought and thought and thought, and finally he said, I know. Instead of paying taxes, when it comes time in the year to do all of our bottling, we'll have each vineyard family come with a jug of their best wine, and we'll have them add their jugs of wine together into a big vat, and we will sell that wine, and that will produce the money to support the services for the kingdom. So word spread that this is what they were going to do, and the people were delighted. They were just overjoyed, and the king was very happy. And the day came for the payment, and everybody showed up with a jug. Every family, every vineyard came with a jug. And the king was thrilled, and he was so proud of his people. And one by one, they climbed the ladder to this gigantic vat that the king had built and poured their jug of wine into the vat. And then the king was, again, thrilled, and so he said, well, let's celebrate. And he called for his very best goblet to be brought from the palace and had his people dip the goblet into the vat and brought it to him so that he could taste this wine. And he tasted it, and it had no flavor. He sniffed it, and it had no aroma. And so finally, he looked at it, and it was clear. And he thought, well, something's wrong with the vat. So he had them bring him another glass. Same thing. Finally, he said, bring me some from the very, very top. And they did that. Same thing. Odorless, colorless, tasteless. And so the king ended the celebration, and he called for all of the royal alchemists to come and to tell him what could possibly have happened, why the wine had turned into water. Finally, one of his wisest advisors bent down and said to him quietly, "Sire, there's no magic here. The only thing that happened is that your people are human." And of course, the king was deeply disappointed. And the story eventually came out that over time, as people were talking about this plan, they would be gathered together and talking, and they'd start joking about, well, you know, not everybody has to contribute wine. If one or two people added some water, nobody would ever notice, right? So guess what happened? So the point of all this is how we trust and what kinds of trust there are in the world. And what we see in this story was something we call blind trust. The king trusted his subjects so blindly that even presented with the evidence that they had all done the wrong thing, he couldn't believe it. He couldn't accept that this wasn't magic, turning wine into water. We're used to the opposite. So again, it's a reminder about trust, which is our theme this month, of trusting in a way that is authentic and is based on reality and on clarity and on evidence, as opposed to blind trust, which is just so open-ended that people, in a way, people reject it. People don't feel that they have to abide by that trust because it wasn't earned. True trust is earned. Thanks for listening.
This morning's responsive reading is found as an insert in this morning's order of service. It is Psalm 23 for this moment by Kevin Tarza. I invite you to read the bold-faced sections of it with me. May I remember in this tender moment that love is my guide, always shepherding me toward ways of openness and compassion. Just when the weight of the world I inhabit threatens to drop me in place and press my hope down into the ground beneath me, love invites me to rest for a gentle while and leads the center of my soul to the quiet, still, restoring waters that somehow I had not noticed. Even when the walls close around me and the cries of death echo through untold corners, gripping my heart with fear and sadness, I know that all will be well, that I will be well when love whispers near to me, glints at the corner of my eye, rests with gentle and persistent invitation upon my shoulders. I live in a house of love, love that will not let me go.
I live in a house of love and always will.
invite us now into a time of meditation and prayer. Today we're going to do something very different. We're going to practice humming meditation. Humming meditation is an old practice that is known to create vibrations within our bodies that help us to relax. And so when I invite you to begin, just start humming. And then notice what happens to you and to the room around you. But first, let's get ready by taking a deep breath or two in and out, and in and out. And now inhale and just begin to hum. And when you run out of breath, inhale again and keep humming. Experiment with changing your pitch. Try to see if you can match your pitch to the people around you. And the next time you pause for breath, just stop. And notice as the quiet of this place settles back around us and envelops us. And as we sit in this quiet, let us think about how, as a group, we sustained the hum much longer than we could as individuals. Let us remember how we carried each other, covered for each other as we took turns breathing. Spirit of life, help us to remember that when times are hard, we will need to pause for breath. And help us to trust each other to carry the community when it is our turn to do so. Let us meditate on this as we enter into silence.
reading this morning is from Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. Cause and effect assumes history marches forward, but history is not an army. It is a crab scuttling sideways, a drip of soft water wearing away stone, an earthquake breaking centuries of tension. Sometimes one person inspires a movement, or her words do decades later. Sometimes a few passionate people change the world. Sometimes they start a mass movement and millions do. Sometimes those millions are stirred by the same outrage or the same ideal, and change comes upon us like a change of weather. All that these transformations have in common is that they begin in the imagination, in hope. To hope is to gamble. It's to bet on the future, on your desires, on the possibility that an open heart and uncertainty is better than gloom and safety. To hope is dangerous, and yet it is the opposite of fear, for to live is to risk. I say all this because hope is not like a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. I say it because hope is an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Because hope should shove you out the door. Because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures, and the grinding down of the poor and the marginal. Hope just means another world might be possible, not promised and not guaranteed. Hope calls for action. Action is impossible without hope. At the beginning of the massive 1930s treatise on hope, the German philosopher Ernst Bloch wrote, "The work of this emotion requires people who throw themselves actively into what is becoming, to which they themselves belong." To hope is to give yourself to the future, and that commitment to the future makes the present inhabitable. Anything could happen, and whether we act or not has everything to do with it. Here ends our reading.
We gather here in this sacred and beautiful space this morning, grateful to all of those who came before us, who made this church possible through their vision and their commitment and their generosity. And each week we take up a collection to practice generosity ourselves, which is one of our Unitarian Universalist core values. We give to carry our church forward into the future and to support all of our work in the wider world. Our offering this morning will now be gratefully received. Blessings upon the givers and upon your gifts. What a year this past week has been. One thing has become clear over the past 2 months, and that is we have been strapped into a roller coaster for a very long ride. Now, of course, roller coasters can be fun and exciting for some people, for those who know what they're getting themselves into and who enjoy that rush of adrenaline. But then there's everybody else. This month, as we have endured the abrupt twists and turns, the long, slow climbs, and the terrifying plunges, the daily desire to stop the ride and get off, our theme here at church has been trust. And my plan for this month was to work toward a service today that would explore our loss of trust as a country, the loss of trust in our institutions, in science, and in one another. I plan to talk about how it's been 5 years since the initial COVID lockdown in March of 2020, and how the pandemic exposed this absolute lack of trust in scientists, in medicine, in the government, and how we simply can no longer agree on much of anything at all. But in the past few weeks, as I've watched, as have many of you, as there have been more and more brazen attempts to undermine our most trusted institutions, the judicial branch of our government and our Constitution. And I decided that dissecting all of this today would just weigh us down even further as we rocket around a roller coaster track, unable to stop. A better question for this moment is, what can we trust? And I worked my way through my usual answers, the answers for me anyway, that we can trust in the shared strength of community, in the creation of caring networks that form based on human altruism. I trust in the human drive of so many to achieve, to make life better through innovation and invention. And I trust in the very long arc of the universe that we bend slowly over the years toward justice. But there is something else that serves as a foundation for all of those elements of a trustworthy society. The foundations of community and the drive for human flourishing through justice and well-being. Underneath all of those worthy goals lies hope. So the question this morning is, can we trust in hope? Let's begin by talking just a bit about what hope is. For starters, hope is an active emotion and not at all passive. It's not sitting at home wishing all of this would just go away, even though we all do plenty of that. Hope spurs us to action. Hope gets us up and moving. It says, well, maybe we could just try this one thing, and then another, and then another. The author of our reading earlier, Rebecca Solnit, wrote, "It's important to say what hope is not. It is not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in," she says, "is one about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that demand that we act. Hope locates itself in the premises that we don't know what will happen, and that in the spaciousness of uncertainty, there is room to act." We don't know what will happen when we dare to hope and begin to act. But hope is present along with us on the roller coaster. If not for hope, with the moments hope offers of that climb upward, we would be strapped in from one long continuous drop down into despair. This past week, there was plenty of frightening news of people being treated with contempt, of power grabs. But at the same time, we hoped as judges intervened to restore important jobs and to try to protect immigrants. And our spirits would rise. And it helps us to understand better now Charles Dickens when he wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." On Friday, our social hall was filled with people coming together to act on their hope, figuring out together what actions to take. 2 months ago, this group didn't exist. Who would have believed 2 months ago that the actions of groups of protesters standing outside of car dealerships could cause sales and stock prices of that car brand to plummet? But one action at a time, one location at a time, has snowballed into a powerful impact. And we ask in hope, what will come next? We don't know, but these actions are giving us hope that something new will emerge, and maybe we will take part in it. Hope is contagious, and it can keep us from despair, which is isolating and draining. Can we trust hope? Well, one thing we can trust is that it never goes away. Emily Dickinson famously wrote, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all." When Rebecca Solnit set out to write her book on hope, she found herself turning to many instances throughout history when hope emerged in crisis. Sometimes it showed itself as a political movement, the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, the student protests in Tiananmen Square in China, the Arab Spring. And sometimes it appears suddenly in the face of a natural disaster. Rebecca likes to tell the story of the Cajun Navy, the individual boat owners who loaded their small crafts onto trailers and drove toward the unfolding disaster of flooded New Orleans back in 2005. There was no plan, no coordination beyond a request on a local TV broadcast. The boat owners didn't know whether they would be able to get to the city at all, or once there, if they would be able to save anyone. But they showed up, fueled by hope, and one by one managed to pluck desperate people out of trees and off of rooftops. Did it make a difference? The story always reminds me of the old tale about the little girl walking on the beach. The tide had gone out and the sand was littered with stranded starfish. As she walked along, she would pick them up one by one and toss them back into the water. Her grandfather told her not to bother. "There are so many starfish here," he said, "you can't make that much of a difference." And the girl threw another starfish into the water and replied, "Well, it made a difference to that one." And so the Cajun Navy arrived, circumvented roadblocks and orders to stay out of the city, and eventually, one by one, managed to rescue 10,000 people. It would have been so easy to think, well, is it worth it for me to drive all the way there? Can I make a difference? But hope tells us that we can make a difference. Hope tells us, just show up and see what you can do. Hope stirs in us, beats its wings, and urges us into action. And when we decide to see what might happen, we can, as our African American friends and neighbors always say, we can make a way out of no way. In times such as this, hope is a form of resistance. Those who are determined to take away our civil rights want us to lose hope, to despair, to keep the roller coaster plunging down to a place where there is no energy to fight back. This week, the US government targeted a library that was deliberately built across the US-Canadian border in Derbyline, Vermont, and Stansted, Quebec. The library and its upstairs auditorium were built in 1904 as a symbol of international cooperation and harmony. The main entrance is in Vermont, and Canadians were just always freely allowed to enter. And this week, access for Canadians was abruptly limited, and beginning in the fall, Canadians will have to pass through border control to go to the library. Almost immediately, the president of the library board, a woman named Sylvie Boudreau, announced that they were setting up a GoFundMe to crowdsource the expense of creating a new door on the Quebec side of the building. Boudreau was near tears making this announcement and said that she was sad and disappointed and even angry, but we will rise above all this. We will rise above all this. Hope fosters action, and very quickly a plan for a new door. And what do we need more these days than new doors? And action in turn creates more hope. So again, we ask, how do we trust in hope? As we heard in our story earlier, we don't want to blindly trust anything, even something as resilient as hope. We don't need to trust without questioning, because there is such a thing as false hope, often offered to us by those who would try to push us into complacency or despair. For months, the president has said repeatedly that no one will cut Social Security payments. He is offering false hope, and we must not blindly trust this. So we should question our hopeful feelings, ask ourselves where they come from and if they can be trusted. And to help us decide, all we have to do is to look backward and remember stories from our history, such as what I've shared this morning, of all the times that the arc of justice bent when we were least expecting it. And what we are trusting in that moment is that history and resilience, which leads us to believe that hope really is present in us and between us, is a fundamental part of our humanity. This helps us to take the risks, to stand up and act. We need hope. We need hope and joy and humor to help us remember our humanity and our agency, to bolster our resilience, and to brace us for the next plunge along the track. There will be those who will try to take hope away from us, always. The road is a winding one. It's never straight. It is full of uphill climbs, and precipitous plunges. There are surprises and unpredictable outcomes. Hope urges us to remember what we have accomplished against all odds and urges us to do it again. I'll let Rebecca Solnit offer these words in closing. We write history with our feet and with our presence and our collective voice and vision. Together we are very powerful, and we have a seldom told, seldom remembered history of victories and transformations that can give us confidence that yes, we can change the world because we have many times before. She says, you row forward, looking back. And telling this history is part of helping people navigate toward the future. The past is set in daylight, and it can become a torch we carry into the night that is the future. You row forward, looking back. May you find hope and clarity of vision and resilience in the days ahead. Blessed be. Amen. I invite us now to say the words of our unison prayer, which are printed in your order of service. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, in whom is heaven. The hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and testing, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is number 331 in your gray hymnal. Life is the greatest gift of all. and the work of friends and lovers belong to the task and are its health. Rest and rejoicing belong to the task and are its grace. Let tomorrow come tomorrow. Not by your will alone is the house carried through the night. Invite those of you at home to hold up your candle or chalice, and together we will blow them out as we say the words to extinguish our chalice here. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. You go in peace and return in love. Amen.
Would you